Warning, the following show doesn't represent the opinion of CIVL, its employees, or the local clown college.
I'm Dr. Daryl Ray, and I took a left at the Valley, and the party was really good.
I woke up this morning, had a burning deep inside, like when you're feeling it's all a big lie. I feel the pain, there's hunger and despair. Stop the rhetoric of your teaching, time for us to share.
Out of the studios of CIVL 101.7 FM across the country and around the world, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin, and today I will be your host, like most times. Joining me today is the great team that made CIVL 30% more in your face. Our matriarch of time, Nancy.
Hey, how's everybody? Welcome.
Didn't hear you there. Our newsworthy friend, the Reformed.
Good afternoon.
Or I just kicked Superman's ass, Martina, Wonder Woman.
Hi there.
And Tyler, who was recently rated at 2 million lumens. Guys, welcome back. And Nancy, you brought a friend.
I did. I brought a very good friend.
Turn the mic towards you here, dear.
Okay,
I can't hear you.
Here we go. Now, there we go. I brought a very good friend, Doug Smith, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into a little bit more about why Doug is here. Say hi.
Hey, how's it going? 1997, Doug Smith. I'm here just to have some fun, yeah?
Cool. A bit of chit-chat. Hey, guys, did you know that this little gang actually managed to score an interview with the James Tyler? Our Reform, how do you say it?
Oh, the Amazing Randy.
That's right. I'd imagine No Religion 6. That's going to be pretty cool. So make sure to listen in as we'll have eventually something coming in from our friend there, James Randy.
Fantastic. Our great host, Kevin. A round of applause for Kevin for getting the Amazing Randy.
Oh, God. A little bit of chit-chat. Did you guys see that some of the funky news that's been coming out this past week? Like a last show we had a skeptical look at Easter. And did you guys see this? Yeah, just wreck the place.
Sorry.
Did you guys see that actor in, I believe it's in Mexico, that actually was actually portraying Jesus? He kind of got onto a cross, and it's like a 4 or 5 meter high cross, right? And they're raising the cross with him playing Jesus, and they kind of went a bit. So you can imagine you're like 4 or 5 meters high on a pole, right? And they went a bit too far, and the guy fell off. So as soon as that happened, I couldn't help but start thinking, "Oops." I couldn't help but just do that as soon as I saw that, right? Oh, yeah. So we had fun with that. Did you guys also hear that the Office of Religious Freedom actually closed?
It did?
Yes, it did. The mandate ended on March 31st. So this is the office, you might recall, that was opened in 2013 by the Tories. Although I think it was pretty much a thinly veiled, just trying to push Christian religion, especially on the public, because it wasn't doing a whole lot of work for the other religions. The Tories at the time, as I don't know if you guys recall, actually even went to the point of eliminating all the chaplains out of prisons, except the Christian ones. You know, so if you were a Muslim in prison, too bad. You're not going to talk to anybody that a religious counselor, I guess. But the Christians one remain. And now, of course, on March 31st, the mandate of the Office of Religious Freedom ended, and the Liberals decided they will not reopen it, and they will close it.
I think we should have a round of applause for that, too, eh?
Yeah, totally. Oh, goodness. Oh, and on top of that, did you guys notice that, you know how science is actually getting better and better, and it's getting more mainstream? Because now, there was actually a game, you know, like a lot of fighting games are all the rage for a lot of people, and they have a fighting game now called Science Combat. Did you guys hear that?
No.
It's actually, it's kind of funny because you have essentially you could be like Darwin, right? And you're fighting Einstein, or you could be Madame Curie fighting Stephen Hawking. It's amazing. You know?
Is it a game for
It's a computer
teens
game.
is it a game for teens and adults, or is it?
Well, we got you a copy, Nancy.
Okay.
Okay,
I didn't want anything that was above my pay scale.
I'm curious.
Nancy's
how,
a resident gamer.
Is
Oh,
Steve,
yeah.
is Stephen Hawking kind of like Professor X?
No, but
I'm kind of curious. How does he fight?
They all have the-
mind bending.
no, they all have their interesting thing, right? But he's in his chair, obviously, and he does black holes. So black holes appear and, kind of suck you in, and you have, like, Nikola Tesla that throws in this big energy beam and Madame Curie that throws, like, radium poison or something like that. That's pretty amazing stuff.
I'm buying that game tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's called Science Combat, so I thought it was pretty cool. Nancy, are you ready to go, my dear?
I'm ready, sir.
Let's do it.
And here we go. This day in history, which I hope our listeners know by now is a roundup of those events and individuals that altered and illuminated the days between March 28th to April 3rd. Starting out with a high note, March 28th was Left-Handed Day. Are any of us left-handed except moi? Oh,
No,
okay.
you're in the minority now.
I'm in the minority. The superior minority, but the
Hey.
minority. And on March 28th was the day that Typhoid Mary, in the States, if anybody remembers, Typhoid Mary happened wherever she was. She spread typhoid, but she was healthy. She never got it, but she sure gave it away. I guess that's the gift that keeps on,
The gift that keeps on giving, yeah.
giving. So she was the first healthy carrier of disease ever identified in the States. And unfortunately, she was put in quarantine and she had to stay there for the rest of her life. So that's not, I guess that was the first lady in the bubble. I guess.
What year was that?
That was in 1915.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
April 1st.
I'm not that old.
Not that. Speaking of which, April 1st was April Fool's Day. And it was also a really funny holiday or event called Edible Book Day. And it's an international day where edible books are created, displayed, and small events are held. And I guess if one has to eat one's words, that's the best way to do it.
Oh, where's my bell? I don't have my bell.
I couldn't resist that one. Okay, so April.
Forget eating crow. Eating your words way better.
Yeah. So April the 1st, if you look it up, there's always the 10 best pranks and the 10 best jokes. And so this prank that I'm going to tell you about always is either number 1 or number 2. And in 1957, in Britain, there was a news broadcast show called Panorama. And it was a show that was a magazine. It was sort of like us, but it was a little more sophisticated in some ways. So people took it. People, would normally take it fairly seriously. So they made a 3-minute segment about a bumper spaghetti harvest in southern Switzerland, and it was and they said it was due to an unusually mild winter and the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil. But to cap it off, because it was a TV program, this is what was so funny. They actually had actors. And they made a video of this family pulling pasta off of spaghetti trees and putting them into baskets. So they showed this whole harvest, and they showed that they looped the spaghetti around the trees. And because it was 1957, people didn't always have a really good idea of what was happening. And
They never had a good idea what was happening.
Yeah,
in
what was happening.
1957.
So people really believed it. And while people believed it, they wanted to know how to grow their own spaghetti and whether they could do it. And so the show actually got a phone call. This is the best part. Actually got a phone call from a lady saying, "How can I grow my own spaghetti?" And so the producer of the show very nicely, very seriously said, "For those who love this dish, there's nothing like real homegrown spaghetti. So just place a sprig of spaghetti in a tin of tomato sauce and hope for the best." Great story. So April the 2nd was World Autism Day. And if it's spring and if it's warm weather, Kevin, then this story has to be about baseball.
Of course.
Okay, here
Hold
we
on,
go.
I better get comfortable for this.
I know, if it's not Texas, it's baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so on April 2nd, 1931, an individual called Jackie Mitchell actually struck out both Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in succession in an exhibition baseball game against the New York Yankees in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Wow.
So this is how it happened. The New York Yankees were invited to play an exhibition game against a Double-A minor team in Chattanooga, Tennessee, called the Chattanooga Lookouts. So the game was supposed to be on the 1st, but it was postponed to the 2nd because of rain. So Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, heavy hitters of the Yankees, and 4,000 fans turned out to watch the game. First inning, Yankees at bat, and the lookout pitcher gives them a run and then a walk. Coach shakes his head, replaces him with the lookout star pitcher, Jackie Mitchell. Now, Jackie was a nickname. The pitcher's full name was Bernice Mitchell.
A woman.
A woman.
Wow.
Not even quite a woman. She was a 17-year-old girl who amazingly had a wicked southpaw pitch that had earned her a pending contract with the Lookouts. So up first, here comes Babe Ruth, and she strikes him out. Next up, Lou Gehrig, and he goes down swinging. So 4,000 fans stand up and give her a standing
My
Yay!
goodness.
I know.
Some 17-year-old girl just struck out
17
Babe Ruth.
I
and
know. Almost,
Whoa,
almost,
blows my mind.
almost beyond belief. So the Yankees won 14 to 4, and her victory strikeouts are in the baseball history books. But there's a little, rumor and a little controversy about whether the strikeouts were real or a deal. But nonetheless, Jackie's ability and talent as a pitcher was never questioned. And afterward, she actually went on to play with other teams and then retired at age 19 to join her father's business. And the funniest team that she played with was called the House of David, and all the guys had long beards and long hair, and so she put a long beard on. It was in the 20s. Baseball
Sounds
was
like
fun.
The Duck Dynasties of the 20s.
Absolutely. It's just a wonderful. I love that story. So let's end on that fun tale. And dear listeners, that will bring to a close another passing parade of interesting, mundane, unusual, and occasionally bizarre events and people that make up this day in history.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Wow. That was an amazing story. So just imagine how easy it'd be to strike me.
Story.
Did you know the left-handed? I wanted to go back to the left-hand day because only about 10 to 12% of the population are actually left-handed. And if you go way back, people in schools, I know this for sure in the UK, people in school who were left-handed were not allowed to use their left hand, and they were actually forced to learn to write with their right hand. And they were punished for using their left hand because the left hand was seen as evil or demonic, and even in different religions, like in Islam, you can't eat with your left hand. It's considered to be blasphemous, and even in Hebrew times or among Hebrew people, the left hand is considered to be a lesser hand. So kids were actually forced up till recently to use their right hand over their left. Interesting.
Yeah, I got a little bit of that in school because back in those days, believe it or not, we still had desks that had ink wells, and you had the sort of the quill type pens, and so when you're writing with your left hand, you just make a mess all the way. With those wet ink, you make a mess. But after a while, I don't know whether my parents talked to the teachers or they were enlightened enough to say we can't break her, we might as well join her. But I still have to cut with my right hand because the scissors are not really made for left-handed, so I'm sort of ambidextrous.
Interesting. My dear friend Tyler, you got a bit of a nice story because, like we like to do, we like to put a spotlight on interesting characters. And today, you're doing Bart Ehrman.
Yes, I am. But first, I just wanted to make a comment on that spaghetti tree thing.
You want a little bit of spaghetti in a jar of tomato sauce to take home?
You said, well, it was 1957. I know lots of people who would still fall for that today.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at me when you said that?
Anyways, yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of history of Bart Ehrman, but I don't want to go on and just sound like Wikipedia. But he became a Christian in high school and kind of figured that studying the Word of God was probably the most important thing he could do. So he ended up going to some very right-wing schools initially. He went to the Moody Bible Institute and then he went to Wheaton College, where he learned to, read and write Greek and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then he heard about Bruce Metzger. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him or not.
Afraid not.
He was a very, very famous New Testament scholar. He was known as the best, which is why Bart Ehrman decided to go to Princeton Theological Seminary. It's the complete opposite of Wheaton.
Tyler, can I ask you to put your mic just a bit closer to you?
Yeah. It's very
Thank you.
very left liberal. The Bible's not the word of God, that sort of thing. So he went and got his PhD there, and that's kind of he studied the Bible so much that he lost his faith, I guess, which is pretty typical. I mean, I've seen studies out there that say atheists know the Bible better than most believers, right? So he is an agnostic atheist like myself now, and I just thought it was really interesting that you have one person who can go through the same type of schooling and get a PhD, and they just pull all these mental gymnastics to keep their faith alive. And he just said, if it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true. So his story is very, very, very interesting. I mean, he has a bit of a fight back and forth with Richard Carrier as to whether or not Jesus really existed or not. But I really don't care, because they agree that Jesus from the Bible never existed, right?
Yeah.
The actual character in the Bible. So I think that fight is kind of pointless. But yeah, my source for this was Jesus Interrupted. I actually own the book. I was reading it the other day again. It's fantastic. I've read several of his books. That is the one that I would recommend to everybody the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a collection of all the contradictions in the Bible, and he actually gives some good explanations as to why there are specific contradictions. And then I've started to kind of notice, atheists, some of my fellow atheists, using some of the contradictions, but not understanding the theological implications or significance or why it's like that. Like, I'll give you an example. Atheists like myself, I used to say there's a contradiction between Mark and John as to what day Jesus died, right? You guys are familiar with this contradiction?
Yes.
Okay, but the reason that John changes it is because he wants him to be murdered the day before the preparation for the Passover, because that's when they would slaughter the lambs.
Mm-hmm.
So he's having the Lamb of God be slaughtered on the same day that the Jews would slaughter the lambs, right? So I found that to be very, very interesting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he certainly is one of these authors out there that's quoted on a regular basis. Anybody wants to do any kind of research on anything that's historicity of the Bible or Jesus or any of the characters like that.
Oh, amazing information that I never found anywhere else. He actually goes into, the oldest manuscript of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. They say this, and then a couple hundred years later they changed it. Like, one great example was one of the oldest copies of Luke, where Jesus goes missing for 3 days. Wow. They just left their kid. Oh, yeah, we should probably go back and get our kid, eh?
Yeah, of course.
But Mary goes and talks to Jesus and says, your father and I were looking for you. Your father? Wait, what? I thought God was his father. Yeah, so exactly. They read that, and later manuscripts, they changed it to Joseph. So things like that you just don't hear or you don't find on the internet. He has amazing information in those books. I could go on and on about all the great things in that book, so I highly, highly recommend it.
Excellent.
One of the things I've done a little bit of reading on with Bart Ehrman as well, and one of the things that did it for him too with his deconversion was the idea of suffering.
God's Problem, the book, yeah.
How could an omnipotent, omnipresent, all-loving, all-caring God allow for so much suffering to occur in the world and not intervene? Yeah, and God's Problem is an excellent book to read about that. And I know when he was teaching, or he still teaches at one of the universities.
Chapel Hill in North Carolina.
And one of his classes is about suffering. He has his students look at it, and he doesn't try and, convert them one way or another or deconvert them. He just asks them to look honestly at how suffering is portrayed in the Bible and how it matches up to what we see suffering today. And it was interesting, too, when you were talking, Tyler, when I went through my deconversion, Bart Ehrman was one of the... I actually read about Bart Ehrman when I was reading Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Good. And he mentions Bart Ehrman in there, so of course I went off to find out who Bart Ehrman was and discovered, this guy and his deconversion. And one of the things that Bart Ehrman said was that his deconversion process and experience was one of the most emotionally traumatic things that he ever went through. And I could relate to that, because when you have grown up with, so much certainty and faith and religion, and then all of a sudden that whole foundation starts to crumble, you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
at the beginning of Jesus Interrupted, he said while he was losing his is it on? While he was losing his faith, it wasn't just like a simple thing. He went down kicking and screaming, right? So the last thing that I will say is that because of that, suffering and whatnot, he started up his own blog. It's the bartermanblog.org, I think it is. You'd have to look it up. But all of the money goes to charity, taking care of people who are suffering around the world. I think it's $25 a year, so like $2 a month. So that's great. That's amazing.
That's pretty cool. Thank you so much. And we'll be right back right after this.
What is secular humanism?
Critical thinking.
Knowledge is freedom. Freedom from ignorance and its offspring, fear.
The BC Humanist Association has been active in the Vancouver area for over 25 years. We offer a friendly and welcoming place to make new friends, as well as free educational lectures. We invite you to join us any Sunday at 10 a.m. in the Oak Ridge Senior Center. Please visit our website for more details, bchumanist.ca.
You're listening to Left at the Valley on CIVL 101.7 FM.
Here's an excerpt from Powerless No Longer by Peter W. Soderman.
One night in late August 1990, I was sitting in my living room continuing a normal evening of drinking after the mosquitoes drove me inside. I was making up stories in my head about adventures that would never happen when my 15-year-old daughter appeared out of nowhere. She stood 10 feet in front of me, fiddling with a piece of paper in her hand. "Dad," she said with a tremor in her voice, "what did you think of the poem I read for you on the deck? You said you wanted to think about it for a while." "What poem?" I couldn't remember even seeing her earlier, let alone any poem. Thrusting the paper towards me, she said, "This poem, Dad. I've been working on it for days." I looked towards the floor and muttered something, hoping it was appropriate. I can't remember what I said. When our eyes met, I watched her expression change from hurt to anger, then from anger to disgust. I saw myself reflected in her eyes as we both realized at the same instant that I was a complete fraud. She crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it onto the rug. Her hair swirled as she spun on her heel and ran from the room. I forgot the poem, but I still remember her sobs. I looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time and realized this was coming to an end, and damn soon. We were living off sales from 2 years ago, and the pipeline was empty. I was a liar, a cheat, and a phony, and one of the few around me who didn't realize it. If the world would stop, I thought, I could get myself together and begin to make things right. I tried hard not to drink anymore that evening, but the glass magically continued to fill itself. When the pendulum clock on the wall bonged 1 a.m., I stumbled up the stairs, undressed, and fell into bed. As the room began to spin, I felt absolute panic. I knew I couldn't face life without alcohol to kill the pain. Yet, I knew I would die if I continued to drink.
Powerless No Longer, Reprogramming Your Addictive Behavior by Peter W. Soderman is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
And we're back. Hey guys, I got a great person on the line with us. I've got Ian Bushfield of the BC Humanists. Ian, can you hear us?
Yes, Kevin. Good to be back.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
No problem.
So, Ian, I hear that you're having there was a bit of an event there. The BC Humanist was essentially trying to fight the old battle of getting Bibles out of the school district in Abbotsford and Chilliwack, and there's been some development on that.
Yeah, so there's some feedback
to give out Atheist Comic. How that must have been received pretty well.
Yeah, we've gotten some feedback on that, but it's basically just our goal is to stop the distribution. We don't really want to see anything distributed. If we have to discuss religion in schools, it should be sort of on an equal footing and not just who has the most money and who can advertise the biggest. We don't want a arms race of advertising in schools.
Mm-hmm. So, and then of course, and then the press got a hold of the story, and they've put this all over the news, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic. We sent the letter over. Well, it's good. All news is good news, right? So we sent the letter over spring break and gave it a couple days, and got confirmation that the superintendent had received the letter, and we put it to the press just to make sure that there was pressure on them, because sometimes we feel that they're hoping we'll just go away or we'll get quiet, and we won't. We'll keep it up until we've won.
Okay, so have you guys heard anything from? By the way, guys, if you want to jump in and ask a question, go right ahead. Have you guys heard anything from the school district itself?
They said they've received our letter and they're considering it.
Yeah, that means they're not going to do anything, right?
Well, they haven't told us anything specifically. If you read between the lines in the comments in some of the papers, you might be able to think that they're probably rethinking their position a little bit, because I think we have them trapped. I think the precedents we set out in the letter, the Supreme Court cases, the Human Rights Tribunal, like a Human Rights Tribunal in Ontario considered this exact question of whether you can only distribute the Gideon Bibles, and the answer is no, you can't. It's pretty obvious. So they know they have to do something, I think.
Yeah, actually, Tyler was kind enough to send me a link to, the distribution of Gideon Bibles, even in the States, actually, was deemed unconstitutional. They said, let me read here, it says, they were doing the same thing, distributing to a 5th grade student, and they said the court found both the Gideon's in-school presentation as well as the practice of stacking Bibles by the classroom door with the encouragement to take one violates the Establishment Clause. Although the teachers did not distribute the Bible and the student were not required to take a Bible, the court found the practice to be an unconstitutional government endorsement of religion. And I think this is where you guys are attacking from.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to see our schools promoting religious worldviews. I mean, this same fight's going on again and again, time after time. Right now it's also happening in Colorado, where I think an atheist group has gotten Satanist coloring books into the library because that way the school was happy they could still distribute Bibles, and now people are a bit upset that Satanist books are also in their kids' libraries.
Oh, I so want one of those coloring books. I got a nice shade of red for that.
Well, and the hypocrisy here is that if we were handing out, Christopher Hitchens' God is not great, how religion poisons everything, they would flip.
Yeah. So Ian, when do you plan on stopping harassing all these poor Christians?
I mean, it comes down to when religious privilege is removed from our school systems. That's what we're really challenging. We're not stopping people from being Christian. We're not stopping people from having religious points of view. I even said to one interview, if parents want to give their children Bibles, they can find them. They're on the internet. They're at bookstores. They're at libraries. We don't need to have our schools involved in this advertising, proselytizing scheme.
Yeah, but Ian, if you take God out of the school, out of a secular school in a secular country, that's not a theocracy, don't you think that, he might get angry and send tornadoes and, plagues and stuff like that?
Well, that's what they'll say.
Yeah, would you really want to take the chance?
Well, we're taking the chance with climate change and dumping fossil fuels into the air, so what's another risk?
Good answer.
So, Ian, it's the Reformed here. What's the next step? Like, is it kind of a sit and wait to see what they come back with, or do you have anything else kind of up your sleeve to keep the pressure on?
That's basically where we're at, is waiting for the district's response. If they really start to drag their heels, we'll crank up the pressure. We have, legal counsel on hand. We have very generous lawyers in Vancouver willing to side with us pro bono if we need to take this to a Human Rights Tribunal or if we need to take this to court. But for now, the ball's in the Abbotsford School District's court to decide what to do. I mean, if the superintendent doesn't act on it, and we believe he has the authority to just stop distributing or stop permitting the distribution of religious materials, we can take it to the school board as well and challenge them.
Okay, well, if you need to, get a whole bunch of copies of The God Delusion, give them to me, and I'll go and hand them out to schools.
Well, that's why we went with these Godless comics. There's so many different materials that are fantastic that we could have tried to distribute, but we needed something And while I'd love to give some, bigger comic books or some great material that is out there for children, we found these Godless Comics, and the creator of them was very friendly and very happy to see us or hear about our story and supported it.
Well, if people want to support you, this is Nancy here. If people want to support you, they can make a donation to make sure that you've got enough copies and you can do what you want. Where can people make a donation to help with your campaign, Ian?
Yeah, if you go to bchumanist.ca/donate, we have a page there, and you can contribute to our Secular Schools campaign. And whether we have to distribute these Bibles, or if we have to go to court, or if we need to just keep up the pressure, it all takes some money. And we're trying, we operate on a shoestring budget, but nothing's free.
Yeah, and I think the public needs to know as well that just because you're humanist and atheist, we're natural friends and all of a sudden, it's not because you're not trying to push an atheist agenda here. You're just trying to push equality. If it was a school distributing copies of the Quran, you would have the same beef, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's why the thrust of our letter is just that the precedents are clear that schools shouldn't be advertising for religious groups, and we don't actually really want the atheist comics being distributed any more than we want Bibles being distributed. We want schools to focus on education and teaching. I mean, our school system's under such financial stress that they shouldn't be wasting their time and money on these fights. They should be getting on with educating.
Well, and the funny thing is that the link that I sent Kevin that he read you a little bit, I actually got that from a Christian, and I'm in some Christian Facebook groups, and I talked to a whole bunch of them, and they actually agree with us. They don't want the Quran being handed out in public schools. They don't want, well, like you said, atheist literature. They don't want Christian literature, and they're Christians, and they agree with us.
Yeah, it's important to remember religious people aren't a monolith. I was speaking with a Christian magazine on Friday. They're going to run a story on this for the Light magazine that goes out to most of the churches in the Lower Mainland. And that's not to say they're going to endorse our position or oppose our position, but they have different viewpoints on it. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of religious people benefit from secularism just as much as atheists do.
Well, and I got a little confused because Kevin sent me that
I confuse everybody.
That letter to the editor thing that's linked to all of this, right, Kevin?
Yeah, well, it was just letters to the editors in the Abbotsford News. People have been reacting a lot to that story.
Yeah, it was just strange because we're talking about handing out Bibles, and next thing you know, they're saying evolution is the atheist view. And the Facebook group that I was talking about, it was it's mostly Christian scientists. They all accept evolution, and a lot of them know more science than I do. Celebrating creation by natural selection, and I kind of copied and pasted it into the group. And they're like, evolution isn't the atheist model. It's also the Christian model.
It's a science model.
It's just the model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just that diversity of their worldviews. There's different positions. And when people say we're attacking Christians, no, we're just pushing back against this sort of evangelical right that thinks they have the right to be in schools advertising. And that's just not okay.
Thank you, Ian. Keep in touch with us, will you? Still in the line. I just want to talk to you real quick here, and we'll be right back right after this.
Thanks.
Oops. By David G. McAfee.
It is the same highly regarded concept of an afterlife that allows misguided religious people to justify the mistreatment of those who disagree with their religious ideologies. They are simply trying to protect you from eternal damnation in the afterlife by condemning you, insulting you, and even disowning you in this life. It is not to say that becoming open about your disbelief is always going to be met with these negative reactions, and, in fact, that is precisely what this work is hoping to prevent. But it is important to understand that if you experience negative reactions from religious kin, it is probably a result from the religion's teachings, and likely not from any personal vendetta or hatred.
Find this audiobook and many more at atheistaudiobooks.com.
You are listening to Left at the Valley on CIVL 101.7 FM.
And we're back. We were supposed to do a show this week about childhood obesity. Our friend Connie, who hasn't quite recovered yet, could not make it. So we decided to do a show about another very important issue, about the homeless situation here in the region. And that's why we have Nancy and her fantastic guest, Doug, who's been really quiet so far.
Well, that comes to an end real quick.
Well, the microphone is yours, guys.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to take my historical fact hat off with my left hand, and with my
The evil left hand.
The evil hand, and with my right hand, I'm going to put on my nonprofit hat, because in addition to the fun we have here, I'm also secretary of the board of directors of a nonprofit called the Abbotsford Dignitarian Society, and we are a nonprofit society dedicated to helping the homeless here in the Abbotsford region, and our main project is to build a village called Abbey Diggs, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but I'd like Doug to introduce himself, and what we're going to do is I'm going to go over some stats, I'm going to talk a little bit about homelessness in general, and then Doug is going to come back and talk about homelessness in Abbotsford, and then we'll get into Abbey Diggs. So,
did you teach Doug the secret handshake?
The secret hand, you betcha.
Because you can't talk on the radio unless you get the secret.
No,
I'm just
secret
kidding.
handshake. Okay, so Doug, why don't you give a little introduction, and then you get to do the main introduction when we get to the Abbotsford part.
Okay. My name's Doug Smith, and I have been homeless, and I'm part of the Abbey Diggs that you are, of course. And I don't know, I've been trying to do some work for the homeless people for a couple of years now. It's just sad how people get treated and changed. It's like you're a vermin because you don't have a home. I try to tell everybody, we're Canadians, right? In Canada, it's our home and native land, so we're not homeless. We're just houseless, right?
That's a good one.
Yeah. So that's why I joined in with the Abbey Diggs, because we're going to try and build a smaller home. Just a one-room house for people to live out of, right? Just to make it a little easier and more accessible. I mean, a lot of the people are there because of some something happened in their life, and nobody wants to live in not be in a house, right? But it's when you have $375 for rent, and any place to rent $600, and you're forced to have to live with somebody, and then you lose half your stuff, and it's just you get sick and tired of it, right?
Yeah, I think most people don't realize that every one of us are 2 steps away from being homeless. Even include myself. I'll even tell you guys that I actually was homeless for a week myself, and I even had to dumpster dive at one point to feed myself. So I totally understand. Yeah. Well, not as much as somebody who's out there a lot, but please don't let me interrupt. Go on.
No, it's frightening. We're really happy that Doug is part of our nonprofit. He's our vice president, and he comes with a lot of expertise. And he's been on a number of different interview shows, and you've probably seen his picture in the paper if you keep up with anything that goes on. So let's get to some statistics. People always like statistics, and overall, the main statistic is that 300,000 people are homeless every night in Canada. Whether that's accurate or not, but it certainly is a number of people that is distressing, and it's difficult to understand how in a country like Canada we could actually have that many
300,000.
300,000 are homeless every single night.
That's astounding.
It's astounding.
Surely you can't be serious.
Yeah,
I am serious.
Out of the 300,000, people think that people with drug and alcohol problems are the major people who are homeless, and yet there are only 38% who have difficulty with alcohol and 26% that have difficulty with drugs. And if you'd ask someone, they probably would say, 70% of both, and yet it's not. It's just that sometimes people are more visible, and
can you repeat
them as the.
Please repeat those stats, because I think those are worth repeating.
300,000 homeless every night, and out of those, 38% have difficulties with alcohol, and 26% with substance abuse.
Yeah, so so 3/4 of the homeless out there are not hooked up on drugs, and that's important.
Yeah,
because
and what percentage of people who aren't homeless have problems with drugs and alcohol? Right?
That's another good point. Yeah. Because that's the one thing I hear all the time. I hear, you know what? They want to be there. Yeah. They want that lifestyle. Yeah, and that's, bullcrap. Yeah.
It is, but people, there's a tendency to separate us from them, to justify inaction, or
Yes.
to justify being part of what's become to be called the poverty industry, where people make money on people who have drug and alcohol problems. If they don't have the problems, there goes your job.
That's right.
At any rate, an interesting statistic, this is really an interesting statistic, is the BC Ministry of Community, Aboriginal and Women's Services, as well as Canada Mental Health, have they got the facts, and they realized that it costs 33% more to keep people on the streets than it does to give them a house. So the cost of living on the streets in terms of healthcare, courts, police, shelters, all the other things that moving people from one place to the other, criminalizing, it actually is almost it's more expensive to keep people on the streets. And if you give that statistics to someone who's conservative, they'd say, well, let's get people houses. It costs less money. I don't care about being compassionate, but it's a good economic move. Yeah. And yet that number doesn't seem to sway even conservatives.
I don't think people know that number. I don't think most of them are aware of it.
No, it's becoming more well known. Maybe because Doug and I see statistics and talk about it so much, we feel, well, doesn't everybody know this? But no, not everybody knows it. But I think there's an education process that's going on, because homelessness has become much more of an in-your-face problem for most of us. And it's very complex. It's not substance abuse. It's not individual responsibility or lack of responsibility that puts someone on the street. Often it's economics. Someone loses their job. They haven't had the opportunity to save up. The rents go up. And in Vancouver, they talk now not about evictions, but renovictions. The landlord doesn't want current residents in. He wants to be able to gentrify. So he says, I'm renovating. Oh, and by the way, your rent is going to go up by $200 a month, $100 a month. And people have a limited amount of places that they can go, that they can afford. So it's literally driving people out of their home into the street to live with other people, which becomes a dissatisfying situation. And in addition to that, you have, especially in the Lower Mainland, you have people from Vancouver who are having a lot of difficulty trying to find affordable housing. The housing is just going up, 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 up. So they're heading more into the valley to find more affordable housing. But it's not more affordable because the houses here go up, and the landlords say, "Oh, I can get more money." So that leaves the lack of good housing available. In addition to those factors, you also have cuts in social services. Over the past 10 years, there's been a tremendous cut of social services, especially mental health and substance abuse. If someone wants to go to a detox center, there's a waiting list. It's very difficult for them to get in. They get sicker, and yet there's no place for them to go. So unfortunately, you have a perfect storm creating homelessness, and in addition, I keep saying in addition because it's just growing, there are more senior women and more youth who are at risk, and how to house those people is becoming an issue as well. The other factor, the last factor I'll mention, is that BC Housing used to build affordable housing. They don't anymore. They've switched to the 3 S's, which is shelters, subsidies, and service. So you have a lack of building of affordable housing as well. So you have traditional models that are not well kept. You have more people becoming homeless. You have a lack of housing. And in that mix, you have people who make poor choices, but they're not responsible for everything that is occurring that's causing them to live in the woods, to live in tent cities, and to try and eke out some measure of life with the amount of money that they get from social assistance. So now my buddy Doug...
I have a question first.
Yeah, sure.
You said 300,000, right?
Correct.
How many of those are in Medicine Hat, Alberta?
I don't think any of them, because Medicine Hat says that they've eliminated homelessness
By giving them houses.
by giving them houses.
It was
They
quite a
absolutely
successful
did.
experiment. It's actually known all over the world.
This happens all over. This is not actually. Medicine Hat comes late to the housing first movement. Thank goodness they have, but they have.
First in Canada, though, right?
Yes.
It's in Alberta, and one of the reasons they were able to do it is because they've got oil money. And so they built those houses with a lot of the surplus oil money that was coming in. And if there were other provinces that could raise that amount of money or have that money available and had the will to do it, affordable housing could very easily, I say easily from my point of view, be built there as well.
All we have to do is, cut some of the pay for Krusty Clark and all the other MLAs, and we'd have enough money to do it.
Oh.
Yeah, or the
isn't that treason or sedition or something?
Or just revolutionary.
Revolution.
Or what about legalizing weed?
That as well.
What you guys might not know is we actually have a recording of people in the government and their strategy to eliminate homelessness. You want to hear it?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, please.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women.
That is totally genuine.
Okay. So Doug, who is the expert in homelessness in Abbotsford, will give you a little lead up onto why the problem has existed here, and also lead into why Abby Diggs is a viable solution to help homeless. Take it over, Doug.
Hi, some of the things you forgot to mention too about the reason why people are homeless is like you have like just run-of-the-mill people renting out, rooms that aren't even legal, and then I had a girlfriend of mine. She was renting a basement suite, and the people that were renting it to her, when she was gone out, they'd come down and go in through her stuff. She'd come home and find shit moved around and stuff like that. That wasn't when she left, and you have all that kind of stuff that's making people you're afraid to go to sleep because you don't know if the people you're renting off are going to sneak down in there and get you when you're sleeping, right? I'd rather sleep in the bush too, right?
Is it a common thing? Do you feel so insecure at the place you are, you'd rather go outside and sleep out in the park than be inside that house? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah, that's why, and then that's why they group together is because you have strength and unity, right, in the group, right? Have each other's watching each other's back. It's pretty tough. When you're homeless, you got to carry everything that's important to you because if you leave it anywhere, you lose it. And then it's just so frustrating. Yeah, but like a couple of years back, I guess 2.5 years ago, the city thought they'd figure out their way to get rid of the homeless out in front of the Salvation Army there, and they spread chicken and manure on all their stuff and that.
That's the infamous chicken manure incident, which actually made headlines worldwide.
It did, yeah. That was crazy. Yeah, that's pretty much when I jumped in and said, that's it. I had all I can take. And
so the city of Abbotsford thought at the time, let's move these people because the homeless were camped in front of the what's the name of that road?
Gladys, yeah.
By the Salvation Army there, and they decided to just dump chicken manure.
Yeah.
And
by the shovelfuls, all
so
over
the
their
smell
stuff.
Would just get you guys
there's particles of it floating in the air, and a lot of people that weren't homeless but just going to the Salvation Army were getting sick and
it's horrible to breathe that stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy, man.
Who was responsible for doing that?
The city.
The city, yeah.
The city did that. Yeah.
And I looked, and 100 years ago, the Salvation Army had over 100 people that were homeless, camped out beside the shelter there. Then the people used to jump onto the trains and sit on the top of the train and ride it to Vancouver to look for work and stuff like that. And it was no big deal, man. People were more, nowadays everybody's, me, and, I can't help these people out. They're going to get me, right? And, back then it was a little more open and, people tried to help each other. And I don't know what's going on, it's crazy how everything's just,
It's this whole get rich or die trying mentality we have today, which
exactly, you can't take it with you, so I don't know what the big thing is, right,
I'm gonna ask a question here that might be a bit touchy for you, Doug. I've heard, and this is unsubstantiated, so I will say it right now, it's a rumor, but I hear that one of the reasons it's so slow and to bring in the money for projects like Abby Diggs is because money goes down from the provincial government to the city, and that's distributed among some charities, like the Salvation Army. And rumor is, if that provincial money comes down and it goes to the city, and then the city gives it to a project like Abby Diggs, then places like the Salvation Army don't get their cut.
Yeah.
And that is why they lobby against that project. Is there anything to this, or am I just out
No,
of...
I'm pretty sure. You know, the Salvation Army gets something like $300 and something a day for each person they put up. And I don't know about you, but for me, if I had $300 a day, I'd be living pretty high in the hog.
$100 a day.
Yeah, they get over $300 a day for putting people up.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, if the city can afford to pay these guys that or donate it or whatever it is, why? I don't understand why we can't just, if we all just tried to put it and get rid of it, it'd be gone, right? I mean, we don't have to pay, $300 for a fucking piece of plywood, right? If we all put our backs together, we can end it like nothing.
So $300 a day, Salvation Army get approximately to look after someone for a day or put someone up.
Yeah.
And how much does somebody on subsidy? How much does somebody on income assistance receive if they have an address?
Well, I get $375 a month for rent.
Now, is that dependent on if you have an address or not?
Yes.
So if you don't have an address,
then
you don't get anything.
No, I get like the support money is what they call it. Because I'm on disability, they give me $500. But if you're not on disability, you get like $125 or something like that.
And that's to do for the month.
That's for the month.
And yet they'll give the Salvation Army $300 a day.
Yeah.
I guess even worse.
I think the math works out, doesn't it?
Well, it gets even worse than that, because the Salvation Army, being a religious organization, they don't have to open their books.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, it's
nobody knows exactly where that money's going, right?
Yeah.
Now, no, I don't want to pick just on the Salvation Army.
No, I know.
Just using them as an example.
They do a really good job.
I'm sure
of
they do.
helping, feeding and stuff like that. They made something like $3.8 billion last year or something like that.
Oh, jeez.
Why not just give you $100 a day? I mean, that's kind of the idea here with this basic income guarantee, which I'll be doing a segment on in the future. Is they want to give everybody basically full-time minimum wage, which comes to about $1,600, $1,700 a month. No, you don't have to have an address. You don't have to you just get it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, it costs you $70 a night to go stay in a motel, but it'd be nice to have, a warm shower and heat and all that. And,
it would be. Totally.
Well, I guess all those welfare workers would kind of be out of a job because they would just direct deposit it or send you a check, right?
Exactly. Well,
that would pay for itself right there.
It would. One of the things that Doug has talked about is the $375. Keep that in mind, because this is going to become very important as we begin to tell you about Abby Diggs. Abby Diggs is going to be a homeless village based on successful villages in the States. There are 13 homeless villages in the States that are successful, and there are 23 waiting to be built. And the reason they're so successful is because, as Doug was saying, they create a sense of community. Ours is going to be 40 individual cabins where people can have a lock on the door. They can keep their stuff. Washroom, kitchen, and laundry will be shared, so there'll be a sense of community. You don't have to stay in your house. You can get out. We'll also be able to have gardens. We'll be able to have lawn maintenance. We'll have a lot of different things where it's going to be a home. The homes are going to be tiny. They're 8 by 12, the size of a bedroom, but they're large enough to be able to keep you safe. They'll be insulated like a regular house. They'll be run by the villagers. The first level of management is going to be a village council. So it's not that moving in and then having to take somebody else's rules where they decide you can't have visitors, you have to come in at 9 o'clock. This fosters a sense of community and self-empowerment that is really central to the village. The $375 is going to be the rent. So you don't have to stay with anybody. There's no money that's going to come from the government. It's the money that people would get for housing, and the $375 for the 40 cabins will be enough to operate the village. We have a budget. The houses are going to be very attractive. It's going to be a place where people can come and say, wow, I'd like to live there. I think this is a really neat-looking village, and it'll help foster a sense of wanting to be a part of it, to be a part of the community service. It will give people an address us. We got community partners already. We have the Salvation Army, we have MCC, we have Habitat for Humanity, and we're building community partners. Our first step is to file an application, which we've already done, for a temporary use permit. That goes through the planning department, and then we go to council, and it's up to council if they'd like to approve this as a pilot program. There's no reason why it's not going to be successful, because, as they say in the poverty biz, it's based on best practices, and we're sure that if given the opportunity, that people who live there will be able to be proud of it, and they'll be able to take people on tours and say, this is what we can do. The village can go up in 2 months, whereas if you have affordable housing, it takes 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. So although it's only going to be big enough for 40 people, it's going to be big enough for people to have that sense of being, sheltered for the amount of money that they can afford.
And it's meant as a transition.
It's right? Housing first. It can be a transition for people like Doug. If Doug comes and he becomes part of the community, and then he decides that he would rather have an apartment on his own, he can do that. If there's someone with more severe mental issues of one kind or another, or they're just not ready to take on the responsibilities of life in the larger community, they can stay as long as they want. We can't toss anybody out and then say, well, we are housing first, but not for you because you're not quite ready. He can go, or she can go, when there's an appropriate place for them.
And will there be, I'm presuming there will be additional support services for people who have maybe addiction issues or mental health or even physical health issues? There will be support services offered?
There are about 154 homeless people in Abbotsford, and most of them are receiving closer to 200. Doug is giving me I'm underestimating. Most of those people have a case manager or are on some form connected with some agency. It's difficult because you can't get connected with an agency if people are scattered all over. So this gives a central location. And yes, we will have a manager that will come in and make sure that everybody there receives the services that they need. What they call wraparound services. Wraparound services and transportation, plus the ability to grow their own food, the self-empowerment of management. It really is. It's an idea that goes back to the 1800s and 1700s when the pioneers first came into this part of the world. They pulled together, they worked together, and they solve problems together, and so that's important.
I find it amazing to see why it's taking so much time. I mean, this makes perfect sense economically, makes perfect sense humanely. I mean, and this is not a handout.
No, it's a hand up.
It's a hand up,
yeah.
Right? And it's way better than having a guy sleep in a tent and 6 inches of water in the middle of winter here.
Yeah, freezing and getting sick.
And the cost of building all this village are minimal, and the land is private, and all the city really has to do is maybe put a sewer line, if that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, this is a no-brainer. Why is this taking so long?
I know it's been, it's been over 2 years now, 2.5 years, since we've been trying to get this done. And, that's why it's so frustrating, because it's a no-brainer. I mean, like when you're talking about services and stuff like that, it's a lot easier for the services to deal with people when they can find them. If you're always moving around because, you're getting thrown out of one spot and, your stuff stolen from here and that, and you're always moving around, it's hard to get, with people with mental health, to give them the assistance that they need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anybody who is interested in learning more about Abby Diggs, we have a website, the Abbotsford Dignitarian Society. You can find us, abbotsfordhomeless.com. We have a lot of information there, and then a Facebook page that was put together by UFV students who also have a petition that people can sign to go to council, and that's called Abby Diggs. So Abby Diggs on Facebook and Abbotsford Homeless in terms of our website, and we welcome you. You can ask questions, and you can help support us. So hopefully by this summer, we might be able to actually get the village started.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Time for my rant. Well, speaking of charity and all that, no, whenever I have a discussion with a believer, they quickly jump to the merits of charity work offered by the religion. This is usually done in a desperate refuge they seek to justify the long overdue existence of their favorite mythology. Imagine if someone today came to you and said, well, yeah, of course the Temple of Poseidon had many great wars, killed countless heretics, and still hides criminals to this day, but we also do great missionary work. Do you still believe that religion tries to help your fellow man? I've got some bad news for you. Religion is overall a business. Like most businesses, they care about their image, lobby government for special privileges, and make sure overall they can stay in the black. Don't believe me? Then just consider little facts. The Vatican is said to manage $7.3 billion, $20 million in U.S. gold reserve, and an unknown value of historical treasures. Some have measured the Vatican to be worth $180 billion. Every week, the church pulls $850 million through donations. That's over $44 billion per year. Just one mega pastor, like Joel Osteen in the States, is worth $40 million, lives in a $10 million mansion, and his church collects $600,000 per week. And now the cherry on top. The UN estimates it would cost about $30 billion per year to feed the world, end poverty and hunger worldwide. This means that the Christians, just in the U.S., and that's 5% of the world population, could solve the problem. So when you hear the less fortunate and hear people they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps, remember this. The reason for homelessness today is because feeding the poor has a bad return on investment. Nothing else. Religion sells you an invisible promise, collects your money, then works hard to market an image designed to pry your wallet open even more. It preys on your humanist nature to enrich itself and then attributes their failure with a glitzy image. Look at us. We're trying to save people. Please give more. Don't fall for their trick. Remember, you vote with your money, and you really want to help humanity, give to a secular organization. Or better yet, get involved. Because if you do, you'll truly show what humanity is all about. Simply being good without the false promise of reward, for goodness sake. All right.
Yeah.
And that takes us to the end of our show. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you, Nancy, for this great presentation.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Coming up, and next week, we actually have Randy of the podcast, The Legion of Reason.
Yep, we do. And then the week after that, April 17th, we have our 420 marijuana special.
Woo-hoo!
Hopefully with... Hopefully we will have Jody Emery with us that day, so that's going to be pretty special. So check it out on the webpage, too, www.leftatthevalley.com.
We got many more great things coming on the pipe. Make sure to listen to us, and you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can send us an email at leftatthevalley@outlook.com or leftatthevalley@gmail.com. If you listen to a podcast either via CIVL101.ca or you could go to blogtalkradio.com, and you can listen to us also on Spreaker.
We also have a Facebook group as well, right?
We got lots of things. Search for us. We're out there, guys. Thank you so much, guys. Until next time.
Such power.